Hey everyone, welcome back to CITE, and we're super excited to be telling you about what CITE will be doing for 2021. This is our first event in literally over on this long without a CITE event since CITE has been back in 2014. If you don't already know, my name is Georgianne Gettin. I'm the founder of Caribbeans in Tech and Entrepreneurship, and I'm also the president of the organization. And we've been around since 2014. This idea came to me simply as a meetup suggestion because I saw, Blacks in tech, Latinos in tech, Jewish in tech, women in tech, so many different groups in tech. And I knew that being Caribbean was a sacred space for me, and it was a very important part of my culture, but I didn't see a space in tech for Caribbeans. And so I created Caribbeans in Tech and Entrepreneurship, and then reached out network to see who would be interested in this, created a meetup.com group, and now we have had over 600 people join our virtual, hundreds of people participate in our in-person meetups or CITE Summit and various events that we've been doing over the years. So I'm going to pass it to Malcolm, who is also a member of CITE. Do the introduction before we go over some stuff that you should be expecting from CITE 2021. Malcolm, take it away.
Thank you very much, Georgie, for the introduction, and pretty much everything you said there. I'm completely on board with it. So my name is Malcolm Paul, and I am the vice president of CITE for this CITE not-for-profit, which we're currently working on. And I support CITE in technology matters when it comes to maintaining the technology, discussing technology with members, discussing, how to get your product to market, all those kind of things. So I'm just here to provide support for the organization in whichever way, shape, or form is possible. You've probably seen me at events sometimes, probably supporting or even hosting. So yeah, anything we need to do, we'll work to get it done.
Thank you so much, Malcolm. And for today's panel, we're going to be talking about what's next, right, post-COVID, specifically as it relates to Caribbeans in technology and entrepreneurship. And that panel is going to be moderated and led by Jadon Johnson, who is currently working with us as a business development strategist to get CITE off the ground, right? Over the years, we fluctuated with it just being a community organization, and in 2019, we went and took the step to incorporate CITE as a nonprofit. So currently, we're working on our nonprofit, finalizing our nonprofit status with all the tax stuff, the fun stuff, and our memberships. And Jadon has come on board to help us in that capacity. So you'll meet Jadon in just a moment after this introduction video. Another thing is that now that CITE is a nonprofit, we are a nonprofit. We are looking for support, whether it's in-kind donations, offering services, and different ways to interact with us. And as we finalize that tax status, then you'll get, your write-offs and your benefits for supporting Caribbean technology and entrepreneurship. We have also an event planned for the rest of the year. So this is going to be our first one. And we have some events coming up for June, which is Caribbean American Heritage Month, as well as Immigrant Heritage Month. As well as summer and in the fall. So the website, a little bit more about some other opportunities that we have coming up inside of Caribbeans in Tech and Entrepreneurship.
Yes, indeed. And as we do, so we do welcome volunteers. We do appreciate any energy that comes in, positive, vibrant energy from the Caribbean. We love that. We're also looking to secure 2 positions for the CITE board, which are the secretary and treasurer. So if anyone is interested in that opportunity, I'll explain to you the details, what we expect from you, and also what you excellence in technology and entrepreneurship in the Caribbean to the community, and we'd definitely be happy to have you on.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Malcolm. So without further ado, we're going to let Jadon take it over and run this amazing panel with
Hello. Hi, everyone. Hope everybody's having a great evening. My name is Jadon, joining you guys live here from Miami, Florida. And today we have a pretty exciting lineup. But before I kind of get into who's joining us, I mean, everybody knows who's joining us, but let me just put some context on the discussion today. COVID came, put the world on like a very awkward pause for like the past year, but now we're slowly transitioning back into a new semblance of normal. The times are once again precedented, and as always, we kind of have to bring some of our local community leaders together to talk about, well, what exactly does that mean for us as people in technology, specifically looking at our role in the Caribbean, our role in the diaspora, and how is it that entrepreneurs, people in the ecosystem can take advantage of some of the new opportunities that have sort of emerged from it. So I'll just make a really quick introduction of the guests we're expecting, and then they can give a quick intro of themselves as soon as we kick off. So joining me today is the CEO of Rebel Girl Media and founder of Silicon Carib, Ingrid Riley, who has been a stalwart in the Caribbean tech ecosystem for about the past 10 to 15 years. And then also joining me is David Mullings, CEO and Managing Director of Blue Mohawk Capital. David has been one of the Caribbean's biggest advocate in terms of getting investments into local businesses and really helping to boost and promote the Caribbean community. Welcome, guys. Thank you for hopping on.
Thank you for the invite, Jordan. Good to see you, Ingrid.
Yes, good to see you all again. I mean, it's always good to see the Caribbean people dispersed all over the place.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. And joining us a little bit later is Leighann Buchanan, who's the CEO of Air Ventures, an organization that's been kind of focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion here in South Florida. So yeah, we have a stellar panel. But before we kick off, like Ingrid, do you mind just telling us a little bit more about the work that you've been doing in Jamaica and the Caribbean through Silicon Carib?
Well, yeah. So Silicon Carib and what we've done over the last 15 years. So that what shows.
So they have Ingrid doing an intro for herself. We do 2-minute intros for ourselves.
Oh, exactly. We can hear you.
And they put us up alone on the screen. So yeah.
We're here, David.
Oh yeah, here it is. I'm like.
Just a context. I know David is running a live. David is running a live there, so he's just giving his users a walkthrough of the experience.
Multiple screens and multiple streams. I love it.
Yeah, no worries. Well, please go ahead, Ingrid.
So Silicon Carib basically has been focused on the future of technology and Caribbean business since 2007. Started with a blog. We went to a couple of events and it kickstarted a whole ecosystem and community in Jamaica. It spread to 10 Caribbean countries and to the diaspora. So over the last 15 years, we've basically kickstarted a movement, a community, had over 300 events, and really kind of zoned in on helping entrepreneurs to see the possibilities of this digital age. And so we've worked with entrepreneurs, we've worked with government, we've worked with development agencies and investors as well. So the work continues and I've been enjoying it ever since.
Yeah, and I mean, the Kingston Beta was like a really long-standing event in Jamaica's ecosystem, and I'm one of the people who have benefited from that. Thank you, Ingrid. And then David, can you just like give us a picture of the work you're doing with Blue Mohawk Capital and some of the big things on your radar through your firm in this coming year?
No, sure. So I'll keep it short and sweet. We can dig into the details during our chat. But my brother and I founded our first tech company back in October 2001. Real Vibes grew to become the largest platform for Caribbean music videos on the web. Taught ourselves how to program the website, stream videos online. Eventually, thanks to Kingston Beta, we were able to really interact with the local community in Jamaica, and then she had Caribbean Beta. So Ingrid did an event called Caribbean Beta, and I was able to sign on as one of the first sponsors for that. And we could bring in some people from Silicon Valley that could bring that approach, that entrepreneurial approach to business, to investing, to startups back to the region. And that's what's important to us. So with Blue Mohawk Capital now, I was working previously in private equity, and then at a hedge fund, we wanted to build a company that could invest in listed and non-listed equities. So companies, public and private, in the region, because the Caribbean is home to what we consider a lot of great opportunity from the business standpoint, but they're overlooked they're underloved, and they're undervalued in most cases. So how can we, one, through an impact fund that Blue Moho Capital is launching, support earlier stage companies? These are not pre-revenue, but early stage. And then from our balance sheet, we are investing in profitable existing businesses domiciled in strong long-term growth industries. And we think the Caribbean has a lot to offer the world.
Yeah, thank you, David. But so I mean, a very funny thing. I was back in Jamaica just like a month ago, and I was hanging with Ingrid at a local coffee shop, and a thing that kind of struck me is the conversation on digital transformation, on tech and startup is not a very new one. I believe innovation in a Caribbean context has looked a little bit different from what we expect in places like the United States and some more first world countries, but by those standards. So I mean, Ingrid, as we've kind of seen how COVID has accelerated that push to digital transformation and not to like force businesses, it was kind of like a transform or die. Like looking back and looking to now, how have you seen things evolve, and what do you think is next?
Well, I am very glad that COVID has basically created another round of shocks to the system of across the region in terms of a number of different industries. Because like David alluded to before, we always knew that there's a lot of potential, a lot of great ideas, a lot of great talent, a lot of great business opportunities in the Caribbean. And I think with COVID, people actually saw, first of all, the entrepreneurs who've been underground doing different things really starting to float to the top. There are others who just simply saw the opportunity that this disruption created in different industries and just jumped in and started to doing things. And it forced the established businesses to say, hold on a second, we're going to have to really get into digital, really kind of get to understand the trends of the digital consumer for us to stay relevant, for us to stay winning. So I'm excited about certain industries that are being disrupted, and I've been tracking a couple of trends, and the keynotes and the conversation that I've been having over the last couple of months, I've always been kind of pointing to these trends that I've been seeing. And if you want me to get into them now, I'll just read afterwards. But I'm excited because I'm always on the ground talking to entrepreneurs across the region in the diaspora. They come to me and they say, hey, I hear what we're working on. I was just at the same coffee shop at AC Hotel in Kingston yesterday, Jordan, and I booked up 2 local entrepreneurs, and immediately I got a range of, like a news bite in terms of this is what I'm working on, this is what's coming, etc., etc. And I'm just freaking excited, really.
Yeah, nice. And I mean, yeah, this is I think you gave me the solid example when we spoke in Jamaica about like Prendies, who's like a really local icon. If you've been to Jamaica, you've been to Helsha Beach, then Prendies is a place to go to get your fish, your seafood, and seeing like a business, a very brick and mortar business in Jamaica, like Switch, leverage technology like ENDS, which is the program the Jamaican government had launched to help like delivery services. But seeing companies like Switch like that and really change pace is just a testament to one, not only like what's to come in the industry, but as you rightfully said, just like the long work that has been going into even enabling that kind of environment. But David, from like the investment perspective, I've heard you constantly hammer that Jamaica has been doing very well in terms of being a place to do business. We have one of the top performing stock markets in the world. How are you looking at the digital transformation and how companies are like accelerating towards that shift in the Caribbean? And, not only looking at Jamaica, but some of our neighbors hanging over there in the region.
Right, and so we are a Caribbean-wide investor. We don't just look at Jamaica. Jamaica is ahead of most of the Caribbean countries in some ways from a digital transformation standpoint, but it's behind countries in some ways. So when we look at central bank digital currency, for example, the Bahamas is ahead of us with the sand dollar. They were actually one of the first in the entire world to do that. And Barbados is ahead of us with BIT and what they've also done with Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. Jamaica is just getting on that. So that's good that we finally got there. As a Jamaican, I was disappointed that it took us that long to get with the program and get with the times. But that's also good. We are excited when we look for three things to invest in a region, and that should get anybody excited as an investor. And I think that they overlook the Caribbean too much. My CEO, Aurelia Cruz, calls it a resort distort. You go to the resorts, distorts the way you think about investment opportunities in these countries. You're not thinking about the opportunities that they present, especially they can leapfrog. So when we think of Jamaica that has more than 100% mobile phone penetration per person, that's great. We've leapfrogged landlines. Well, where's the mobile payment system? We're not at that scale from an M-Pesa standpoint. We need to make adjustments, but that's good. You don't want to invest in somewhere that's already perfect. We need to have inefficiencies. So inefficiencies must be present. There should be a lack of equity capital flowing into that region as well. And the Caribbean has proven that debt capital loves coming into the Caribbean, but we're not seeing equity capital flowing in, and we're not seeing that many early stage investors, as we know, whether it's angel investors or VCs. And these are true early stage, true angels. So they're not taking more than 20% of your company. They understand that it's pre-revenue and that you need to scale. And that's unfortunate. We need to change that and get them to realize that. And lastly, we need to see these companies thinking about global competitiveness. That's my biggest complaint in the region, is that too many companies, especially the traditional players that Ingrid will always talk about, who don't want to be disrupted, who don't want to change anything. They like the status quo because the status quo has made them very profitable and very wealthy. Well, they need to realize innovate or die. We are in for IR now. And so it's disrupt or be disrupted.
Yeah. I mean, Jordan, you had said before, you've made mention of, friendlies on the beach and how they're now leveraging ends and also digital media to basically service us through our curfews and our lockdown here in Jamaica. And that is part of the delivery industry, as part of the convenience economy. And that has been blowing up like crazy, especially over the last 6 years with brands like Quick Plate and Seven Crave. So, and we can't just look at just the convenience economy in terms of the delivery of food, but also farm produce and groceries. So that is something that is an industry that I'm watching. The other four that I'm watching is definitely e-commerce, right? We're seeing where, caribshopper.com went and got $1.2 million in funding, because they want to basically, like other entities like Trinitude and other entities across the region, they want to present the best of the Caribbean products online to the region and to the world. And of course, the other industry that I was looking at is fintech. We've always had a problem of payments in the region. There's simply an entrepreneur been able to test their idea, and just be able to e-commerce enable it and receive credit cards and debit cards. I'm looking at the subsectors though. The loan sector and the insurance sector, like the loancirrus.com. Very, very interesting industry that I'm watching. EdTech. Edufocal was born from my event, Kingston Beta, with Gordon Swaby. He's been around for 9 years. I can't believe it's been 9 years, right? He's been around for 9 years, so much so that the dude is married and have a kid. But the fact of the matter is that Edufocal is, start with gamifying how, young people studied for their exams. But the fact of the matter is that the Caribbean is realizing, and we have other edtech companies like One-on-One Educational Services that realize that the future of education is really about getting digital skills, and getting digital skills in a very intense and shorter period, so you can get your talent to the market to make more money. So I'm excited about e-commerce, fintech, the convenience economy, edtech, and health and wellness is my number one. Cannabis, CBD, or local herbs and spices. There's right now booming a CMOS gel uptick, and they're leveraging internet to actually sell it not just locally, but also to export it as well. Those are my top five right now. I mean, there's a longer list, but that's the top five that I'm excited about.
No, and I love that you dig into the industries. I'll touch on some of that. I won't name all industries, but we've done some of these, right? So we own 5%, we're about to own 10% of a cybersecurity company in Jamaica that has some fairly large clients, but we haven't publicly announced that as yet. and we will be getting a board seat. But we've been excited. We've made that purchase August last year, and that's been going really well. We think there's a huge opportunity there. Cybersecurity is going to be really important. Using blockchain is going to be important. Whether or not you care about crypto, blockchain is here to stay. So we like owning a piece of that business. Now, it was public that we intend to buy 40% of Sprint Financial Services Limited. That's a microfinance company. Well, we want to know layer tech. Let's get fintech applied to that. That's exactly why we did that deal. We think that the way we've done business in the Caribbean has been too archaic, and we've taken too long to switch from paper to digital. And I helped I was in charge of launching the internet banking platform for Jamaica National, JN Live. And that taught me a lot about moving certain processes online. At the time, we still weren't opening bank accounts online. There's a huge opportunity there. And I think we need to not think of tech as an industry, but think of all industries being tech enabled. How can tech help a business to become more efficient? But that also means that the Caribbean can quickly leapfrog other regions in the sense of we have an educated population, predominantly English speaking. Think about Jamaica is in the same time zone and the Bahamas, same time zone as the East Coast of the United States. Jamaica is the third largest English speaking population in the Western Hemisphere. We don't talk about that enough. The third largest English speaking population is US, Canada, Jamaica. So when we're offshoring for call centers, I know we call it nearshoring. So you don't go to India, you don't need to go to the Ukraine, you come to Jamaica. Well, why not also do programming here? Why not do back office processing, medical transcription, legal transcription, moving up the value chain? So we think that we need to recognize our people are the most important assets. We need to educate them some more. They need to have data literacy, not just computer literacy. And then secondly, we need to make sure that the technology allows them to be instantly international. So our biggest concern as investors is that a lot of entrepreneurs think too small. They focus on just Jamaica or just Trinidad, just Barbados, or just the Caribbean. And what I try to remind them is that we are small. Those islands really are small. Right? Colombia has 2 cities with a larger population than the whole of Jamaica. Just 2 cities. We need to be building solutions for problems in the region, test them, scale them into Latin America, and scale them especially into sub-Saharan Africa. And I know Ingrid big on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But while I'm big on thinking big and going big as well, I want to also realize and for us to recognize that it's okay to be narrow and deep and small. Because those, niche play, the scale era is definitely still here, but there's also the niche play that is also really kind of bumping up against that. And so we can't overlook the fact that we should be encouraging entrepreneurs. And I understand from the position of an investor, an investor interested in certain businesses and your returns, you're going to think like that. But at the same time, you also want to encourage entrepreneurs to think narrow and deep and focused and small, because there are problems that we're having in Kingston, Jamaica, in Port of Spain and Trinidad, in St. Kitts that also needs to be solved and can be solved lucratively. So there's this huge small business, medium-sized business, section that also needs to be encouraged, that they can solve problems, have profitable business, and still have an impact on their local, their on a national level and on a regional level. And of course, if they so choose to, they can of course go global. So they must see the limitless possibilities that they have at their fingertips right now.
Yeah, and I mean, you guys are really bringing some great points here. I think as we look at like industries, and we've kind of covered industries and key strengths of the Caribbean, and kind of the forward-looking thing. Where should businesses be building next, and at what scale? I do want to take a second to just like quickly introduce our third panelist, which is Leighann Buchanan, CEO of Air Ventures, who's joining us from Miami, Florida as well. Welcome, Leighann.
Hi, Jadon, David, good to see you. Ingrid, great to connect with you. Excited to be here. Just real quick, and I know I jumped in a little bit late in the conversation, but Air Ventures and what I do is really focused on how do we build ecosystems that are for everybody. I think the biggest challenge that we have with technology as an enabling tool is that we forget that it can it can really create equity. And then it can be a tool of solving some of our biggest civic challenges, our biggest community challenges. And so, you know, formerly led Venture Cafe Miami, was able to serve 55,000 innovators in the last 5 years. And we really decided to go narrower, as you're saying, Ingrid, go narrower on how do we strategically and intentionally help communities develop an ecosystem that is representative, reflective, and really creates those seamless transition points for scaling your idea and venture to the maximum possibility, but for individual entrepreneurs and innovators, for them also to have access to capital and access to the opportunities that are essential for growing their ventures. So that's a little bit about me. I'm a strategist, a writer, a lawyer, recovering attorney, and friend of David as well. Probably the best title. And I'm Jamaican as well. You know, grew up in Canada, but went to primary school in Jamaica, and my entire family is from Jamaica. And so it is near and dear to my heart that as we look at Miami as one of these new epicenters of tech and innovation, that we don't overlook the Caribbean, as we have historically done, as a regional hotbed of innovation and opportunity. So that's just a bit of an intro. Happy to jump in on whatever topic you all were discussing.
Yeah, no, I think it's absolute perfect time. Sorry, I'll give you a second, Ingrid, but I think it's really like perfect timing, because I do want to bring this question on unique advantages of Jamaica, right? Like, so I mean, like David raised the resort distort, but I think as we look to the future of work, right? And I'll kind of tag this question. I've specifically chosen this question to tag it in 3 very different ways. So I'd like to throw this question. Let me maybe throw this one to you first, Leighann. As we look to the future of work and people having more like remote and distributed teams, are there increased opportunities for the Caribbean as like a place that people are used to going to, you know, enjoy luxuries, to be a place of work? We have great internet access in Jamaica, like a really solid place to go to and work. With that question, and as we're looking to continue growing and building our ecosystem, how can we avoid some of the problems around diversity, equity, and inclusion within, like, you know, our local communities, ensuring that we're not only building opportunities for people to like come in, go to resorts and work, but also like supporting local communities, that we don't have like monochromatic spaces, and are really like providing access across the board?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll start off. We've had some conversations, I would say, and David, you're a part of some of these conversations with different folks in Jamaica as well as other islands around where is the opportunity to leverage these innovation hubs in different countries in the Caribbean. And before, up until recently, it had been a digital nomad play. You know, we've partnered with folks in Curacao, and there was an idea around how do we do digital nomad. We've talked with people in other islands, and it was digital nomad. But the digital nomad strategy actually creates more inequities for the people that are often there. And so what I encourage islands to think about is, how do you look at digital nomad as part of a strategy to attract people more substantively? So it's great if you work and you're in Jamaica, but most times you're not paying taxes. The money, you know, maybe you're, you know, going to Sovereign North, having a glass of wine and shopping, but you're not actually putting any dollars in. You're not giving back to the ecosystem. And so beginning to have a strategy where you're attracting talent, attracting companies, attracting investors is one that I think should focus on the sandbox. And so if you're in tech, you're familiar with this idea of a sandbox or a testing ground for new ideas, where I think the islands is so well poised, Jamaica in particular, given the level of education, the fact that it's English speaking, the proximity to the United States, the great relationships, the stable democracy, and all of the other factors that make Jamaica amazing, is how do we think about those industry verticals? And we don't try to disrupt the energy that you see in some of the markets in the United States, but rather become that sandbox for testing, for piloting, for trying things out in an ideal market before you go to sub-Saharan Africa, before you go to Asia, before you go to these other places, because it is the most convenient sandbox you can have. And that allows for you to create some training opportunities for the talent coming up as part of the ecosystem. It allows for money and incentives to stay in the country in a larger way than there's this ad hoc individual way of thinking about economic impact. And it also allows for positioning and branding around what we do well. So maybe Jamaica is the sandbox for health or fintech. Maybe Barbados becomes the sandbox for mobility. So thinking about that regional strategy around how do we become these outsourced testing beds for innovation, and then that allows for you to have the programming and the other conferences, but tied to something that's sustainable and can truly grow an inclusive ecosystem. And the last thing I'll say on your point, Jadon, is one of the things the islands have an opportunity to really think about are looking at what are the drivers of inequity. Something we're doing in Miami right now with our team and 70 other organizations is we're actually doing the first ever equity scorecard around our tech and innovation ecosystem. Nobody's gathered the data. We know there's some inequities, but we haven't pinpointed based off of experiences and gaps where the inequities are. Therefore, our strategy of solving for them is not nuanced. It's not specific enough. So as you think about sandboxes and all these broader strategies around innovation and entrepreneurship as a tool of economic development and economic impact, you can also at the same time begin to benchmark for what are the drivers of inequity. Is it lack of internet access? Is it lack of education, STEM exposure? As David said, the digital literacy pieces, and then solve for that as you build out the strategy to build an inclusive ecosystem.
Yeah, thank you. And Ingrid, I actually wanted to throw the question over to you. So I mean, tag on to that for sure, but I also have a little piece I want to bring in there. I have this idea on, as we're always thinking about transformation and change, that it's always like newness. But I'm very big on looking at what is it that we should preserve? What should we really be like focused on keeping? And one of those things we kind of talked about earlier is this idea of scale. Should businesses or should startups really be like hyper focused, hyper local as we're kind of looking to this next wave and really focus on getting it right? And just from your experience, what's the beauty in Jamaica that we should continue to preserve as we continue to grow as an ecosystem?
Well, let me tag on to Leighann first, and then I'll answer that second. No, I've been a digital nomad for 14 years. Give up my office and everything. And people thought I was crazy because that was 2007. Fast forward to now, we have 12 Caribbean countries that now have remote work visas. And some of those countries actually have dedicated ambassadors or people who are driving that remote work process and culture. I think what it does for us as people who entrepreneurs and investors, we should seek to, as Leighann alluded to as well, partner with them and said, hey, how can we help you make this not just be a thing that was a response to COVID, as a response to finally diversifying our tourism product, so that people just don't come here for sand and sun, but they also come here for startups, also come here to invest, they also come here to live and spread that money. Because I believe that now is the time to start tracking, because I believe it is happening, that the money is being spent locally, because I believe it's affecting the convenience economy, it's affecting food, it's affecting health. And I think over time we'll begin to see, but I'm hoping that we track it. So there's a massive amount of opportunities for partnership, investments regarding remote work in the Caribbean. I noticed I said 12 Caribbean countries, Jamaica is not one of them. We do not have a work visa, right? Let me just put that right there. And I was wondering why. But anyway, regarding the other parts, in terms of what do we retain, I have been a big believer. I've been pumping this message about Digital Caribbean for a number of years now, and my simple thesis is this: each Caribbean country must identify and own what it is that it does best in the world, or what it can do best in the world. What does it have in terms of an unfair advantage? For Jamaica, I believe it's a creative economy as well as our culture. In other, BIT has positioned themselves to be that thing for blockchain and digital currency. St. Kitts is doing some interesting things regarding climate change and climate finance. But how do we identify and own that and then pair it with technology or create technologies and then solve our own problems nationally and then solve regionally and also globally? with that said, as a premise, I believe, because having been steeped and I've been around investors, I'm moving in that era myself, and there's some things that are just happening globally and regionally and locally. We must encourage entrepreneurs to solve whatever problems that they're most passionate about. It does not necessarily have to be, you could be actually bootstrapping a startup. You could actually seek angel investment. You can seek venture capital investment, or you can go to a venture studio, or you can go to crowdfunding and get that directly from people who are interested in your product or your service. So I think the messaging should be that there are a range of possibilities for you to actually do that. And it's too much, I think, before we've been focusing our entrepreneurs based on what is happening in the United States ecosystem. It's all about, being ready for the venture funding. That's not the only game in town, and that's not the only possibility that lies for you as a Caribbean entrepreneur. So I just believe that fine, if you want to scale and go global, do it. If you want to remain narrow, deep, and focused and solve a very lucrative problem in your country or in your region, then do it. But the opportunities are endless, and so you get to choose.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, yeah, you're always spot on, man. But it kind of brings us to this next area where it's like, well, what do we leverage, and what is it that we should be looking at to kind of attract that next batch of investments, or even building at scale. So some of the things you've raised earlier in our conversation is, yes, we're one of the third largest English speaking countries in the Western Hemisphere. What does that look like in practice? How does that become a strength for us?
Yeah, so well, I'll pick up on that. And first of all, thank you, Leighann, for joining us. Really, really happy to see you here. And for me, this is really important to understand that she brought up equity. We talked about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's not a term that we tend to talk about in the Caribbean. We need to have inclusive economic growth, not just economic growth. And COVID proved, right? This pandemic proved just how unequal our Caribbean countries are. It's something that we don't tend to talk about. We tend to think that all of us look like this, and so we're all good. No, we have a very stratified society, a very classist society in most of these countries. And so we need to make sure that we are helping to move more people into the middle class. Technology is going to be important for that. But of course, you can't move into the middle class if you don't have computer literacy, if you don't have data literacy, if you're not prepared for 4R. The other thing that I want to touch on that Ingrid has been harping on is a lack of a regional approach to what we're doing. So you think of Cayman, you think of offshore finance, you think about hedge funds, private equity funds. That's what they're really good at. And that is already remote work. 40,000 plus funds exist in one building in Cayman, right? They don't actually exist here. The people are managing it. You think of Bahamas, you think of insurance and offshore finance. You think of Bermuda, you're going manufacturing, and you're going to obviously think of oil. Guyana now is oil, but also rice. Suriname is rice. Belize, fresh fruits, vegetables. Think about doing a SWOT for every single country. If we do any basic economics class, that's exactly what we think about. We want to understand what are your comparative advantages as a country. Should Jamaica, when Trinidad is already better at doing that than us, well, divert your resources somewhere else. But there are too many countries that want to focus on doing everything and having their own little fiefdom versus CARICOM, which is 20 members that should be working together as a CARICOM single market economy, CSME. The EU has worked together and put aside egos to build a regional bloc and make it seamless for companies to do business with them. They harmonize taxes, they harmonize regulations. You as a Jamaican right now going to have trouble going into Cayman or going into Bahamas or going into Trinidad or Barbados with your CARICOM passport that says Jamaica. We have to get past that. But it's the same thing that Jamaicans are going to actually have a problem with some of these overseas workers coming into their country to come and do work. And we need to recognize that these countries are too small. We need to be working together As a block, right, CARICOM together is what, 30 million, 33 million people. That's better. As a market, that is better. As a region, it gives us a better voice. And I want to keep saying that, like, we need to set aside those differences and think about the fact that we are literally stronger together. So let's work together as a region and stop bad minding each other and stop trying to focus on a small pie and then getting a bigger piece and realize that we can actually bake a much bigger pie together.
Yeah, but I believe that that's actually been happening. It's definitely happened with Kingston data and Caribbean data in the community, but there are a lot of micro communities for women, for developers, for creators that are housed, whether they're on Google or LinkedIn or Facebook or even on Twitter. And I'm loving that they are having discussions. They're helping each other. They're helping each other find resources. They're connecting each other. They're being mentors to each other. So that is happening. I think what we're not seeing, so for me, the community and from the ground up, that is happening. It is the decision makers at the top on the government levels that seem to be stuck a hell of a lot in the same old. This is the way we've always done it. So therefore we're going to continue. Now they are catching heat, as they would say in Trinidad. Yeah. And so therefore they have got to now think differently, especially when they see their crime numbers are up, just like they're up around the world because of COVID. They see the displacement of the jobs falling off because industries have contracted or industries have changed. So hopefully those governments, those leaders, those business leaders will now say, you know what, maybe it's time to come to the table and to have a different kind of conversation. Maybe we would think about, because that whole single ICT space idea has been bandied about for years. I don't know, have y'all heard what is going on with that? Because I haven't. But I'm a big believer in the power from the bottom up. I'm a big believer in the power of community and those connections and relationships that have been made and being made. And maybe that influence and that power will drive change to the top for them to say, you know what, okay, we're going to have to meet with these communities, meet with these individuals who are already changing things and meet them, where they are and move with them. So we'll see what happens over the next 18 months. Yeah.
I agree with Ingrid. With our work at Air Ventures, we've realized something, which is you need to have a meet in the middle approach, just like you're saying. You got to have bottom up and top down. But the one missing ingredient, this is what we're solving for, is we sometimes forget that the leaders are not innovators. They actually lack the capacity. They don't know the language. They have not been educated. They're not as deep into this as we are. And so part of that process requires us, and this is kind of the work that we do, is how do you go with a framework? How do you go with a plan? I always find that when I want something done, I need to lay it out, do the work, and then give the person the framework to execute. And so I think what's often missing, Ingrid, to your point, is yes, we need the leaders because nothing happens without the leaders at the top, but we have to do a couple of strategic things to get them on board. So now their eyes are open. They say, okay, we see there's an opportunity in innovation and entrepreneurship technology. We see that we're getting left behind because COVID showed you if you were not on top of this, you need to be. And so the strategies that we can now implement in many markets, including Jamaica, is first off, I love what the U.S. Conference of Mayors and Kauffman Foundation has been doing, which is this partnership where they do a mayor's conference on innovation. And so it's this peer-to-peer opportunity for all of these elected officials to get deep into innovation. And they bring some of us ecosystem builders, at least with a bit of an overlap, to have conversations. And my conversations with mayors and economic development teams is they want to do it, but they actually are not as nimble and they don't know how. And so we work with them to develop the way to adjust how they're operating, adjust their thinking to understand the opportunity. Second strategy is also to have that framework. We say there's 3 things you need to do. First, you need to assess where are the gaps to make sure what you're saying at the top actually matches the experiences of these communities. You know, like you said, Kingston Beta, all of these communities, they actually have expertise that government needs, but doesn't have the mechanism to extract. So this kind of ready challenge, ready scorecard that we're doing in Miami is designed to fill that gap. Second thing we need to do is we actually need to create a framework for strategic priorities. Just like you say, We can't do everything. You need to figure out what is going to match the needs of the population that we have here with the opportunities, as we all know where the opportunities are. But you sometimes have to put that in a framework for them to say, these are the three things, not just in lip service, but who are the real partners? Where's the philanthropy? Where's the government dollars? Where are some assistant dollars coming from? And the third thing that's super important, that's really hard for folks to do because nothing is ever neutral, is to map the ecosystem. There are all of these maps, but then 5 or 6 organizations that have mapped the ecosystem, and they're never centralized so that government can actually say, when people come to us, because they'll always come to us, we don't know where to send them, and we don't want to pick favorites. So having those neutral tools for building ecosystems, I think, is the critical missing element to getting government on board.
Yeah, I agree with that. And some governments have been more moving towards that than others. I see what is happening in like the Eastern Caribbean, and Jamaica tried it in some respects, and they have called some of us to talk to them, and you know this, Jadan, you know this, David, as well. We've spoken to various ministers of tech previously and been on their councils and that kind of a thing. But you're right, there has to be some sort of a framework, but there has to be, I'm hoping that now, because I mean, I'm sure you've been getting calls. I know I've been getting calls, a lot of calls, because of, being an ecosystem builder for 15 years about how do I do this? I am ready now. How do we actually get this thing done in this particular way? So I'm really hoping that they remain open, and that they remain open to people like us who are here on the panel, that we can actually help them and pick that middle piece of bridging that gap and making things happen in a meaningful and massive way, because frankly, we have no choice.
And I do want to say we're like literally in like the final 12 minutes of this session, so I definitely invite the audience to share any questions that you might have. It's just whichever platform you're on, just type a question in, and I'll share those questions with the panel as they come in. But bringing some attention now to the diaspora and all the people who are Jamaicans or people from the Caribbean living in the US, living in other countries. How do we tap into the opportunity? Like one of the things I see here in Miami is I have not seen the participation from the English speaking Caribbean as much in all this talk about what's happening. How do we change that? How do people from the Caribbean build community, find each other? CITE Collective does a great job at this, but how do we really like tap into some of these opportunities and continue playing like that ambassador role for the region?
Well, I'll start. I served on the Jamaica Diaspora Advisory Board for 3 years as an advisor to a sitting Prime Minister and the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. So I very much have been in that seat, been in DC, and obviously working here in Miami. I feel that I'm an unpaid and unofficial ambassador for Jamaica and the wider Caribbean, but especially Jamaica. And so one of the things I did talk about when I was on Bloomberg last February is specifically about the fact that we have no vehicles to invest back into the Caribbean. And it's a pain in the butt to actually open our own account if you want to invest in public companies. On the private side, we don't know what is available because, as Leighann just pointed out, we've not mapped out the ecosystem. So if you're in the Caribbean diaspora, you live in the UK, Canada, US, EU, elsewhere, you would end up reaching out to someone like Ingrid because you're subscribed to her Silicon Caribbean newsletter. You're going to read about a company, and you're going to reach out to her and say, hey, I would like to be an angel investor in this company and others like it. How could I do that? Well, we don't have a formal structure. There has been one financial firm in Jamaica that tried to build a website that those people actually had to report to me while I was there. They didn't listen about the way to do it. So it's flopped. It's not worked. So why can't we have an online membership driven, it could be free membership, but for potential angel investors from Caribbean diaspora members who want to then see potential investment opportunities in the region, but then we have to also train them. Most of them have never been early stage investors, so they don't understand. And I know it because I talk to these people. I've raised money from some of them. And so there's a financial literacy component that needs to happen. And then you have to partner with somebody like Leighann and Ingrid to have one, mapping the ecosystem, and then two, you want to then make sure that we can actually get deal flow. You don't want everybody just coming to you. You need a way to actually have some sort of deal flow. And then the last thing for me would be, we have to look at the Jobs Act here in the United States and how we can replicate that in Caribbean countries across the entire CARICOM region to allow non-accredited investors to put money into these companies that need help and they want to support them. They're willing to take that risk. It's not a ton of their money, but they'll put in $1,000 US, 5,000, maybe even 10,000, and pool that and support these businesses in a way that's transparent and that's legislated. So in our case, we are doing an end run around it. Blue Moho Capital has its own balance sheet. We invest from that balance sheet. And then we're doing a $100 million US impact fund that's going to invest over the next 10 years in the region. And instead of having to worry about this, maybe we'll build a platform. We'd love to work with someone to put that together. Obviously, we're going to work with Leighann and Ingrid, but I'm sure there's other people in the region that would love to see this happen and bring more of the diaspora in to write in checks and bring in what we say, reversing from a brain drain to a brain gain. Right? They have knowledge, they have networks that they can bring, not just capital. We are smart money in the diaspora.
Jordan, when you talk about how can a diaspora, show up more, especially in communities like Miami, look at just what CITE has done in New York. They've created a community, and they've started having events that bring people out. When I didn't see anything happening, I knew about CITE. I haven't been to their events. Maybe when I get to New York in July, I'll finally meet Georgia face to face. But in terms of Miami, what we did at Silicon Carib was we reached out to Felisa Hatcher, one of the foundation members of the Black Tech ecosystem in Miami, and she did Black Tech Week, and she invited me to come and keynote. And then the other year, I just kind of went to just go and be there. And what we did too, when they started doing Black Tech Week across the United States, we created content panels about the Caribbean within those events. So we said we're going to have to take the message to those places and say, this is what is happening in the region on this level, so that they and engage the diaspora as well, people who are of Caribbean ancestry, and say, listen, let's meet, let's talk. We need to know what you're doing. We need to know what we're doing. So I took startups. I created content panels within existing events and communities that I found in Miami, in Atlanta, and also when Black Tech Week was in New York. That's definitely one way you can do it. So right now there may be nothing. Black Tech Week has now evolved into the Black Innovation Center, and but there are people who have come back from San Francisco, like oh my goodness, Angela Benton, who started New Me Tech, which was again a pioneer and all that. But here's the thing I realize about the American tech space, or the Black American tech space. When they get the money and opportunities, they, like as we say in Jamaica, pass and christen and picnic us, right? And so they take care of the Black American community first. Ain't nothing wrong with that. We Jamaican people, we do that too, right? We have to admit that, right? But at the same time, we have to, that's why we know how, as Caribbeans, within those spaces in the diaspora, have to create our own space, like what CITE has done. So yeah, you, Jordan, Leighann, and David, y'all can create that space right there in Miami, and to have that bridge between there. I'll happily come because I spend half of my time in the United States anyway, right? But I encourage other ecosystem builders across the region to do the same, to show up and take their entrepreneurs to different markets. Engage within, create content panels within existing events, so that we can take our message to say, listen, Jamaica, the region is not just about sun and sea and sand. We're basically sun, sea, and startups, and we're sun, sea, and opportunity, and sun, sea, and great tech talent, and sun, sea, and multidimensional as hell. So that's kind of how I see it. It's a fantastic opportunity. I look for my invitation to the first event, Jordan.
I love it. The only thing that I would add is my team used to run that Venture Cafe program, which was really kind of an epicenter of the ecosystem. We did a lot of focus on the Caribbean, but there was something interesting that we did, and it worked really well, and I'd love to see it happen again. And David, we talked about this. It was the Global Innovation Exchange, which was this idea similar to what Ingrid is talking about, but cohorts, curated cohorts that are doing an exchange. And it's not programmatic in the sense that it's event driven, but it's actually driven on focusing on the connections. So how do we connect you? So we've had groups of startups and ministers come from Curacao, and then we introduced them to investors, someone with like a $10.5 billion fund, and did private office hours, private connections. The curated connections are really what I see that adds the most ROI on any initiative. And so those curated exchanges, but it's got to go both ways, which is something that we sometimes forget here in the US. And David, you knew this. I've done a couple trips, when my mom was living in Kingston, doing a scholar in residence at UWI. I would go down on the weekend, and I did, a couple trips where I said, who do I need to meet? And I started sitting with people, meeting with you. Ingrid, you were out of the country at the time, but I met with people to understand the ecosystem. The onus goes both ways. You have to, as a person in diaspora, now that actually some of us can travel or soon to be able to travel, it's incumbent upon you also to go back and get embedded in the ecosystem, because it's really relationship driven. It's really social capital driven. And so the reason why maybe I can make connections is David will make a phone call. Ingrid, we've exchanged emails, but at any event, she could reach out and say, I need a connection. That's how Silicon Valley actually works. And so we need to think about how do we design that infrastructure to scale these curated connections and social capital, which is really what drives opportunity, and it's really what creates more capital inflow and outflow. And then the other thing I would say is, there's opportunities where you have Caribbean people and Jamaicans specifically running accelerators. Why the heck do we not have Caribbean soft landing specific initiatives at every single accelerator and incubator? I don't see why not. They're already doing the programming. Why are we not partnering with the folks in the Founders Institute in Jamaica? We talked about doing stuff together. There's so many low-hanging fruit, low touch but high impact ways just to add in a Caribbean focused initiative. And so those are my ideas on how we can really activate the diaspora.
Sorry, go ahead, Ingrid, please.
I see an event with all four of us in the future.
So I was going to throw it on the gauntlet, especially because Leighann brought up the fact that I've helped her. I would meet with her mom in Jamaica actually, so I've helped to open doors. We talked about bringing something to Jamaica, to Trinidad, to Barbados, and so coming out of this, I am committed. I'm willing to work with you guys to plan a Caribbean diaspora innovation trip. We can start with one country. We could go to Jamaica once people feel comfortable. I'd love to work on that with you guys and coordinate that. And I'm happy to have Blue Mohawk Capital partner with you on doing that.
I'm ready. Let's do it.
So this is just absolutely incredible. I will say, as Leighann kind of mentioned, that those low-hanging fruits, this is not about trying to fix the world in a day. This is literally about doing the work and making the needle move. For me, one of the biggest things, like I always say, like my couch is available for crashing. And what I've literally been doing the same thing that Leighann mentions, where I invite my friends who are entrepreneurs in Jamaica to come here. They crash on my couch. I bring everybody I know from Miami. I bring them to dinners. I bring them to all events and build real valuable relationships. So, for everybody on this call, on this chat, it's not about figuring out what is next. And tomorrow we're playing the long game, and there's no doubt in my mind that the Caribbean will continue to dominate. We're very small. As Jamaicans would say, we are little but very tallow. So we're a small region, but our impact is felt right throughout the world. And I don't expect that to change anytime soon. So let me just take some really quick questions from the chat. Somebody's just asking, what is a soft landing? Leighann, do you want to just explain that really quickly?
So a soft landing program is typically when a company wants to expand into another market in another country. Sometimes part of the startup visas that you see in the Netherlands and part of the EU, there is a structure to ensure that you can get all of the things you need to do to be successful in that country. And it's all about attracting great talent, attracting great companies that if they become unicorns, you can say they did it in your country. And so it ranges from connections to legal and accounting help to make sure that you can properly do cross-border. It'll help you with marketing calibration because, you know, in the US, a pitch deck in the US tends to be very to the point, very specific. Other countries, there's a little bit more soft cultural elements you need to have. And then it will also sometimes have just like a formal curriculum on all the things you need to know, who you need to meet, what are the hubs. And sometimes they'll partner with a co-working space so you have a physical place to work out of for a particular set of time. And quite often they'll partner with the economic development agency, so the local government or quasi-governmental agency that is really looking at attracting talent and attracting businesses.
Okay, pretty cool, and thank you, Leighann. So I guess just like on a final like note, like how does everybody connect with you, your organizations, and kind of stay in tune with the work you're doing? And David, we'll just kick off with you.
So I'm easy. You can go to bluemahocapital.com, MAHOE. So bluemahocapital.com, or go to davidmullings.com. Or if you're really, really lazy, you can just Google David Mullings and you can get to me. That's not a problem. And I do respond to my direct messages. It's me.
Awesome. Ingrid?
You can go to Silicon Carib. You know, it's right there on the thing there, Carib.com. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter, I'm on everywhere. Just, and as I said, and if you want, just Google Ingrid Riley, and I'm there as well. Always, you know, or you want to just simply email me, Ingrid@siliconcarib.com. I'm always open to answering questions and connecting people and just simply listening.
Thank you. And Leighann.
Awesome. So you can always find me at airventures.org, AIREventures.org, or my website, leighannbuchanan.com. If you DM me on Instagram, I will respond. I am not the best at responding on Twitter. I definitely check my LinkedIn like every 2 weeks, but Instagram, I'm on 17 million times a day. So DM me at leighann.buchanan, and that's probably the fastest way to get in touch with me.
Yeah, and so thank you so much to our wonderful panelists. Just a quick reminder that this session was definitely brought to you by the Caribbeans in Tech and Entrepreneurship Collective. So you can stay in touch with us at CITE Collective on any of your favorite platforms. I'm also super easy to reach out to. I use Twitter a lot. Shoot me a DM at me at JDN Johnson, and I am there and ready to help. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning into our session today. Thank you so much to my three panelists for joining this conversation. And we're kind of looking forward to what's next on our radar. Follow us. We have events coming every single month. So it's going to be pretty fun from here. Thank you, guys.
See you guys in Miami.
See you in Miami.
See you in Miami.
Bye.